So now we're going to talk about having 2 points. And I'm going to save the graph paper for in a minute. But we did this before, and we had 2 points, you know, x1, y sub 1, and then we had x sub 2, y sub 2. And of course the points could be anywhere. And then there's this line, you know, you're going between one point and another in a straight line. You know, you want to go see your friend or whatever, and you're going to be a bird, and you're just going to fly straight to the other bird, you know? Well, now what we want to know is, where's the halfway point? Like, say the 2 birds were going to meet. So you've got one bird coming this way, one bird coming this way. What would be the midpoint? Okay, so that's what we're calling this, the midpoint, halfway between on that line segment. What's the halfway point, or the point in between, or right in the middle? Well, the way you're going to do that, there's a formula for it. It's called the midpoint formula. And the midpoint formula says this. I don't know that we have specific notation for midpoint, but it's equal to the average of the x values and then the average of the y values. So that probably makes some sense. You know, you take this the 2 x values, and you're going to add them together, divide by 2. That'll get you halfway in between the x values. And then the same thing with the y's. So this formula is not an equation. A lot of our formulas are equations, but this is not an equation. It's not an equation. It's an ordered pair. Because you're finding a point, okay? So that's one of the differences, you know, in this formula. They do call it the midpoint formula, but it does look a little bit different because it's not an equation. You're just finding coordinates for a particular point, okay? So now we use the graph paper in this example, so it'll give you a little bit more reference here. Find the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints 1, -6. Okay, so go 1, -6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that point. And -8, -4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there's a line segment between those 2 points. And we're trying to find that midpoint between them. Okay, so the midpoint formula is not super difficult to use. I'll write it again so you can see it. Taking the x values, and you're finding the average. That's why you have to divide by 2. So you add the x values, divide by 2. Take the y values, add them together, and divide by 2. So for our example, we're going to have 1 plus -8 divided by 2, and we're going to have -6 plus -4 divided by 2. And so we're going to have -7 over 2, and here we're going to have -10 over 2, which that's going to be 5. Okay, so normally we would just leave it -7 over 2, comma -5, and list those as the ordered pair. If you wanted to make it -3.5, because it might be easier to graph, if you wanted to see the graph. So that's what we're saying the midpoint is. Now let's see how accurate we are. So if I go -3.5, 1, 2, 3.5, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like right there. Does that look like the midpoint? Yeah, I think that looks like the midpoint. So that's -3.5, -5. Okay, so we found it. We found the midpoint. They're probably going to use the fraction, though. Okay.